Welcome to Resilience Redefined. I'm your host, Michael Ostrolenk. This show is about building better humans, institutions, and systems. On the show, I'll be interviewing many different experts from across many different fields, including human optimization, health and fitness, team building, mind-body medicine. In the institutional space, we're looking at different institutions and how we can create new ones, new models and maps, including in medicine, in education, in intelligence community, in law enforcement, in the military, especially in the special operations community. Thanks for being here and enjoy the show.
Brett Lavender is the founder of the Persuasive Lion and communication strategist, keynote speaker, and a high-performance coach who has spent more than 2 decades helping executives, entrepreneurs, trial attorneys, athletes, and leaders master one of the most important and least understood skills in life, authentic human communication. Through his work in his trademark methodology, The Lost Languages, Brett teaches people how to communicate with greater presence, influence, and genuine connection. What makes Brett especially interesting isn't simply what he teaches, it's how he got there. His work is forged through profound personal adversity, leading him to study the subtle verbal and nonverbal dynamics that shape trust, leadership, persuasion, and relationships. Rather than teaching tricks or techniques, Brett focuses on helping people transform the way they think, show up, and connect with others. Today, we're going to explore the psychology of influence, the hidden language of human behavior, what separates truly compelling communicators from everyone else, and how mastering yourself is a foundation for mastering communication. Brett, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, my brother. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man, it's good to see you.
You too.
Looking forward to this conversation. You know, one of the things I think would be really helpful, and I kind of included this in the introduction, is that your experiences in younger life really were the formative that led you to both almost need to understand the environment and the people in the environment, but led you to kind of do a deeper dive, which eventually led you to write the book and do the work you've been doing for a couple decades. And there's some really informative experiences that I'd love for you to share with the audience, which kind of led you on this path. And I'll kind of, before I have you do so, I think it's important for people to understand the power of sympathetic activation and the need for safety, and how it pretty much led you to almost need to, see the environment as some form of threat that you needed to understand, if that's a kind of an appropriate way to look at it early on. So let me leave it to you. Like, what were some of the formative experiences that led to Brett Lavender?
Yeah, I mean, well, the whole first phase of my life was one big formative experience. Let's put it that way. And I don't sit and stand on this as a sob story. This is just a story that led me down a pathway to self-awareness.
Yeah.
Prior to me being 20, I had an enormous amount of trauma, unusual trauma, especially for someone in my demographic. But to summarize, before I was born, all 4 of my grandparents had already passed away. So I never had the value added of a grandparent who, looks at you with that unconditional love, no matter how good or bad you are. I never got to experience that interaction. My only uncle, what would have been my only uncle, my mother's brother, passed away when I was 2 weeks old. So never met him. And then the real heavy stuff started to kind of fall into place. My mother and my father, I was an only child, so no siblings. Let's add that into the equation. And then my mother and father and I were living in Rego Park, New York. We ended up moving when I was 6 years old to Penn Valley, Pennsylvania, which is a wealthy suburb of Philadelphia. And shortly after my birthday, on Halloween night, my father was found in his car a mile from our apartment with a bullet through his head. Never conclusive as to whether or not it was self-inflicted or it was murder. He was involved in some shady shit going on that I'm really not fully aware of because I was such a young child, but that was never conclusive. So fundamentally, the fundamental question of my life comes with no answer that I will ever have. So that's part of the issue. And then when I was 19, I had gone to 1 year of college at Hofstra and came back to kind of get my shit together. I was going to move to LA and try to go to UCLA. And I found out that my mother had been diagnosed with inoperable liver cancer. So I ended up in a doctor's office with some strange man looking at me as a 19-year-old kid who had nobody to call. Who was I going to call and say I'm in trouble? And he said, your mom has about a year to live. So you really want to make sure you make it worth it and be aware of what's going on. And 3 months later, she died alone in my arms at 1 o'clock in the morning in a hospital room. That's a whole other story about how that came about. And
Well, I think it's an important story to share, and I definitely want to encourage people to read your book as well, but because you share part of the story in your book, because it speaks to me about you, kind of your intuitive grasp, like you're open to signs and symbols in the universe. So if you don't mind just unpacking a little bit of that story, I think it's helpful to.
but yeah, well, let me go back first and say, so, what ended up happening is after my father died, we were in a very wealthy neighborhood, except we were not wealthy. And so I grew up in the best school district, but with no money, no ability to really socialize or financially hang with anybody that I was surrounded by. So I spent many of those years alone by myself, picked on, bullied, no male role model in my life. And what I realized was that what happened when my father died, and then obviously later on in life when my mother died, but going through this whole traumatic experience, even with my mom, somehow, some way, it seemed like a radar, a pattern recognition radar got installed into my nervous system with hypervigilance. I mean, I was literally on my own having to look around for safety and security and guidance and support. My mom was great. I mean, my mom taught me how to love, but she certainly was not capable of teaching a young man how to be a man. And there was not a lot of discipline there. I mean, she had lost her whole family too, if you think
Yeah.
about it.
Right.
My mom was on her own and now just lost her husband. She's got a 6-year-old son. Her only sibling, her brother, died 5 years earlier, 5.5 years earlier. Both her parents were gone. We were in Philadelphia. Any family that she even knew of at that point was in New York. So we were alone. And then throughout the course of time, over really, really harsh circumstances, no money, bullied, no father figure, I really developed a very hypersensitive radar for pattern recognition and depth perception and human behavior and seeing who could I trust? Who could I not trust? When somebody said something a certain way, what did it actually result in? When somebody looked at me a certain way or breathed a certain way before they said something, or I saw a certain sarcastic look through the corner of my eye, I just started to develop this database of information about human reaction. And then, so you were speaking to the story about my mom the night she ended up dying. This is one of the main moments of my life that made me believe in something bigger. I'm not really a very religious person. I like to say I'm, extremely spiritual. Let's call it agnostic. I've always believed in something else. I just never really subscribed to any one religion or another because I was like, who really knows? You have to believe what makes you feel good. And so what ended up happening was right at the tail end of my mother being around, her friends had convinced me to go back to Long Island for a couple of days just to clear my head out, get rid of some of the weight, breathe a little bit. I mean, we had hospice nurses in our apartment, and I was watching my mom, this beautiful woman, just kind of deteriorate into a woman that barely was remembering my name. So it was very hard to watch. So they were like, why don't you go clear your head, go visit your friends, which is something that I will never not regret because my mom was awake at the time that I left and she got to say goodbye to me in that moment. Just, have fun, be safe. I'll see you when you get back. And by the time I got back 2 days later, she was already in a medically induced coma back in the hospital and she would never wake up from that. And so I was already feeling some type of way about that I had missed the opportunity to really say a real goodbye and kind of come to terms with it. And so I was at the hospital that night and my cousin Randy, who's my only living relative, this is my father's sister's daughter. My father's sister passed away years ago too. And so Randy, who was only a few years older than me, had come out. She was the only consistent person that was really kind of supportive of me from New York. And she's like, look, I'll do whatever you want, but it's time to go home. You got to get some rest. There's nothing more you're going to do here tonight. We'll come back first thing in the morning and we'll start over. And so we left and we went to this deli in Marion, Pennsylvania that I had gone to, so many times with my mom, called Jaime's Delicatessen. And we're sitting there and I'm just staring off into space, contemplating. I know what's coming. This is it. It's a 19-year-old kid alone on the planet, no family, no parents, no guidance, no support, barely any money, going, what the hell am I going to do? And yet, in the moment of worrying about myself, bro, something came over me. And I wish I had a really strong ability to give you language for it, but it was just, let's call it a knowing. It wasn't like a thinking. It wasn't a gut feeling. It was just, I know something was saying, you need to literally get up right now like a robot and go back to the hospital. And so I said to Randy, I need to go back. And she's like, we've been through this. Don't worry. Like, Randy, I'm begging you. I can't explain it. Just please, let's get the bill. Let's get out of here and let's go back to the hospital. She's like, okay. Drives me back. It's probably a half an hour ride back to the hospital, pulls up in front of the main entrance and says, I'm going to go back to your apartment, get pillows and blankets, and I'll come back and we'll camp out. And so I went in, and the nurse's station already knew me. It was after visiting hours, but there were no visiting hours for me. It was, you're not stopping me. So I went in alone, watching these machines monitor my mom's whatever was going on. And it was almost an instinctive behavior. I literally was drawn to the moment, and I slid my arm under her neck, and I put my other arm over her chest, and I put my head down on her chest, and I'm just watching her chest going up. It was so hypnotic and it was so entraining. And I'm just watching her chest go up and down. And I swear to you, 20 minutes later, rise, fall, rise, fall, 20 minutes after I got back. And I stayed in there. I didn't call the nurse's station. I didn't call Randy. I just stayed there and cried and contemplated my future. And I got up. I think I punched the walls a couple times and went back and lied my head on it. And I was just going to wait. I was going to wait it out. And then finally Randy came in, and that was that. But I mean, I could not be more grateful for whatever it is. I don't know what to equate that to. I don't have language for what came over me. I have some ideas, which we can get into in a deeper conversation, but that was it, man. And that was the one moment, that was the defining moment in my life after all that I had gone through, all that I had already lost, that said, there's something else going on there. You have to have a little faith.
There's still some challenges in this whole space for you between that and being the successful coach and educator that you are today. Walk us through some of the other things that eventually led you to continue to awaken or open your mind and heart to new ways of being in the world.
Yeah. I mean, look, being an alpha male rogue lion in the jungle, a lot of what I teach, I apply to. The reason I call this the persuasive lion, as you would now imagine, is that I really do identify with the story of the Lion King. So I was thrown out into the jungle with no manual, no guidance, no support, no discipline, no mentor, very little money, very little education, and just said, survive. And so I wasn't really prepared. So right after my mom died, I ended up moving in with a couple who lived on Long Island. Summarizing the situation, it was a toxic situation. Very low moral standards, drugs, alcohol, benzos. They were a young couple. I mean, late 30s, early 40s, and they were like, "Hey, we can't have kids. Come, we'll take care of it. We'll take care of you. We'll bring you in." I didn't have family, and so that turned out to be an extremely challenging time, considering I just lost my mom. The husband was a pretty severe drug addict, cocaine addict. Not only did he burn his own business down, snort the proceeds, but he also ended up getting his hands on what little I had left because I had put my money in their name. I was going to school. And so one thing led to another. Their relationship crashed. I end up in this horrible situation where I'm like, what am I going to do? All my money was gone now. This guy leaves the situation. I'm living with the wife, and I'm 21 years old and she's like 40. And I was at the end of it, man. I just didn't know where to turn. I didn't have anyone to turn to. I didn't have any recourse at the time. And this is interesting because this kind of led me into my career path. One thing that did come out of that relationship was I was introduced to the event business, the private and social and corporate event business. And I ended up in that lane for the next several decades, which is where I kind of learned what we're talking about today. But what ended up happening was I was at the end of my rope. I was potentially borderline suicidal. I was drinking a bottle of vodka a day. I was smoking weed. I was just like at the end of it. So I was seeing a therapist. I finally started seeing a therapist at Long Island Jewish who was a student. I couldn't afford therapy. I didn't have health insurance. um, $15 a session for this guy. He was a student. And I went to him 4, 5, 6 times. And at the last session that I ended up going to him, he said, listen, put his clipboard down. He goes, I'm really not supposed to do this, but I think you need to hear this. He's like, you got to face your fear. You got to get out. In my mind, it was jump off the cliff and grow your wings on the way down. He's like, you have the ability. You're a good looking guy. You're intelligent. You're smart. You're talented. You're funny. You've got the ability to build something really substantial with your life if you survive long enough to make that happen.
Wow.
And something in me clicked again. And I left that session. I went and got a newspaper, got an apartment. A couple weeks later, maybe 3 or 4 weeks later, I was in my own apartment. Not easy. It was a very challenging breakout. I had to break a lease with this woman, and it was just not a pleasant situation. And I had nobody to turn to. So I moved into an attic apartment in Levittown, Long Island, no furniture, barely any money. But I did have this job with this company that was paying me pretty good money for the time on the weekends doing events. And the night I moved out, I locked the door behind me. I shut my phone off. I lied down on the floor and I just let it all out. I broke down and I started my life, 22 years old with nothing. And then it started from there. And I used the event business as that's a whole other avenue. There's many avenues here, but one of them was that over the course of decades, I ended up hosting and performing and emceeing at thousands of events in front of tens of thousands of individuals. And if we go back and we remember that pattern recognition radar, that Apex pattern recognition radar that was installed in me as a kid that has now been really finely tuned over the course of additional trauma, all of these events that I ended up going to ended up being a laboratory, ended up giving me the ability to create a database of behavior and wording and theory and concept behind all these different demographics, every kind of human across the entire species. At the time, I started learning how to engage with all these different animals. I didn't have language for what I was doing. I just knew that when I was in a certain frame of mind, let's call it flow state, when I was nervous system regulated, when I was coherent and present, people would respond to me differently. And then I started applying that to how the machine was connecting with other people. And over the course of all these years, I realized that what I was doing was exactly what I'm teaching now. I just had no language or science to explain it.
Did you do any, I know you did the therapy, which is great. It sounds like a great therapist, especially at the last moment of the last session. Did you do any other kind of inner work around the same time or soon thereafter to help you heal through this process?
I always dabbled in the inner work concept. I tried meditation. I tried, heavy exercise. And I just dabbled. It wasn't until a few years ago that I really had a few moments happen that got me into human optimization, self awareness, mindfulness. And again, over the course of time, it dawned on me everyone that I was engaging with has been imprinted by family, traditional family upbringing, siblings, relationships, social networks, schooling, religion, culture, financial abilities or inabilities. So there's all this imprinting going on. And over the course of time, it dawned on me that I had very different imprinting.
Mhm.
I didn't get imprinted by parents or siblings or grandparents or aunts or uncles or even cousins, not even really a lot of friends. I got imprinted by survival. I got imprinted by disloyalty. I got imprinted by distrust. I got imprinted by a society that made me realize that if you do not have a tribe around you and you are on your own, you better learn how to communicate. And so that's what really led me to my self work because it dawned on me over the course of, like I said, decades,
Yeah.
being in front of every different kind of animal. There was one thread that seemed to kind of make its way through pretty much every demographic, and it is an epidemic lack of awareness,
Yeah.
lack of self-awareness, lack of awareness of your surroundings, lack of awareness of how you show up, how you make other people feel, not what you say to them or what you do to them or don't say or don't do. What was the temperature that you left them with? What was your fingerprint? How did you leave people feeling? And so it dawned on me over the course of time that not only was this epidemic about lack of awareness of how people show up in the world, it's lack of awareness of how people show up in the mirror,
Yeah.
how they show up for themselves, and the lack of awareness of self-talk and awareness and mindfulness. So that's what really led me down this path of getting into it myself.
That's beautiful, but to go from hyper vigilance, very sympathetically activated, to calm, cool, centered Brett, it sounds like it's a process. What happened with a couple of years ago that helped you kind of amplify your own self-awareness that led you to now doing what you do?
I mean, look, there were a few defining moments, which I will go through. And then there was also an understanding of what works with other humans, and then also what works when you communicate with yourself. So going back to getting forged in this fire of trauma. So over the course of time, my career started to build. I ended up living in Chicago for many years. I opened up an event entertainment company out there. I lived in Chicago from 1993 to 2004.
Okay.
And then in 2004, I moved back to New York, sold the business in Chicago, and I was working for an event company that's the company that I had started in Chicago. I sold my interest. Now I'm consulting. So that's when my career started to evolve outside of the event business. I started realizing I was training entertainers, I was training MCs, I was training speakers. And this process, this methodology, the Persuasive Lion and the lost languages, it dawned on me that this technology was valuable for people outside of the event business, outside of the speaker business, outside of people that had to be in front of an audience. It was really valuable for civilians. And so I started to build my company. I got some really great keynotes for Google and JP Morgan, and I was doing some great one-on-one coaching. And as time had it with me, I started to slip. And this time, my issue was not, some villain or some horrible circumstance. It was erosion. I started to not. Here's a guy with enormous talents who's just stopped really paying attention and taking care of myself. So I started having an issue with alcohol. It became very habitual, not addictive, but habitual. And I had just gotten to the point where I didn't see the next phase for my career. Even though I had all these talents and all this understanding, I think a lot of what had caught up with me was my trauma from my past. And I was an angry guy and I was bitter and I was jealous. And I was like, well, wait a second. Unless there's some payoff here, unless there's some pot of gold at the end of this rainbow, can't really rationalize why I've gone through what I went through with no I mean, it was so extreme, Michael, that I was just like, I had gotten to a point where enough was enough, and not having family, not having anyone that was loyal enough to consider me their number one. And so I'd kind of hit rock bottom. And one night I got invited to a Mets game by a friend of mine who I'm still very close with. And he invited me into the president's suite at the Mets game to a situation that I was not prepared to be in that night. I was not at my highest, best place. I didn't look great. I wasn't in shape. I didn't really have anything motivating going on with my career. And I was around power players, celebrities, and really high level CEO types. And I just had nothing to talk about. I was just miserable. I drank the whole night. And so at the end of that night, my buddy and I left the stadium, and I realized I didn't even have my wallet on me because I had driven to the stadium with him and I forgot my wallet. This is how lost I was. So he had to give me money to get me home from the stadium. And that was a low point, man. That was it. And then it got worse. I ended up getting, in December of 2023, I got diagnosed with perforated diverticulitis,
Mm.
rushed to the hospital, 9 days, almost died, was going septic, losing my mind. Nobody, think about this. So now I'm alone. The only thing I have was my dog. And so in the hospital for 9 days, this is right before COVID, ended up surviving that, thankfully,
Thank God.
finding out that I had to go back in a few months for corrective surgery, which might have ended up with a colostomy bag, which thank God did not. Luckily, got the surgery just before COVID shut down elective surgeries, nationwide. And then the world shut down. And then here's Brett, 20 pounds lighter, no career path, drinking a bottle or two of wine a day, just recovering from major surgery on my own, and now facing a major corrective surgery in a few months. Get home from the surgery. Thank God, like I said, no colostomy bag, but spent the next 2 years
Mm.
in isolation,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
glued to the TV, terrified about my life, terrified about my future, thinking, what's the difference? What happens with COVID? Where am I going from here anyway? I don't know what the hell I'm going to do. And over the course of time, in the same way that I kind of found my way when I was 22, I just had another moment of nobody is coming to save you. This life is 100% your responsibility. And if you do not pick your ass up off this couch, you will be here next year and the year after that. And who knows what's going to happen.
Was that a moment in time or a process?
I wish I could say I remember,
Okay.
but something shifted. I had just gotten to a point. I do remember one thing. We had a showcase that I had to attend for the event company, Total Entertainment, that I had started and sold my interest in. And I was like, man, if you show up there looking the way you do after not having seen these people for 6 months, that is just not going to go well. And so I decided in that moment, I always knew that my issues, I'm a very extreme addictive personality, but I always had it in my head, again, a knowing, not a belief, not a theory, a knowing that whenever I actually made the decision to cut that addictive behavior loose,
You're done.
I would replace it with another habit.
Okay.
And that's exactly what I did. I mean, I literally stopped on a dime and didn't look back and stopped drinking, started working out, started taking care of myself. And about a year later, I ended up reconnecting with my dear friend that invited me to the Mets game.
Nice. Nice.
Very big level player. He ended up, went to dinner. He saw that I had pulled my shit together. He introduced me to a dear friend of his who owned a $700 million sales company selling windows. And I ended up getting a really, really great opportunity with a coaching program, a 10-week coaching program that changed the whole trajectory for me. But the interesting thing about that was I was still just kind of doing my thing and evolving and getting better. I was finally making some money again so I could look myself in the mirror and have something to talk about with my career. But then one day, and I outlined this in the book, again, talk about believing in the power of something else, something bigger, synchronicity. I've always been a big fan of Buddhism and Hinduism. So the tree of life has always been a very, very powerful image for me. And I take a long bike ride as often as I can from Hoboken, where I live, to Jersey City, past the Liberty National Golf Course, along the Hudson River. And I end up stopping in my tracks and I see an image of this tree that's getting hit by the sun. The sun is directly above it, literally with between the tree, the sun, and the shadow of the tree looking like the roots. It looked like the as above, so below tree of life image. And I'm like, holy shit. I throw my bike down, I grab my phone, and I literally get it lined up. I can't see anything because the sun's in my eyes, so I don't even know what I'm capturing. And I hit the shutter, and I felt like I saw something like glitch. I didn't know what it was. And I was like, wait, what the hell was that? So I go over to this place where I could be in the shade, and I open up my phone. And if I showed you the picture, you wouldn't believe it. I mean, it's in the preface of my book. A white dove basically photobombs this image. Here's the sun, here's the tree of life, and here's this photobombed white dove, wings spread, literally like you couldn't have dreamt this up in any more of a fantastical way. Wings lit, tail lit by the sun, and I just had another moment where I said, that's not by mistake, that is by design, that is by blueprint. And whatever the reason, let's call it a placebo or let's call it whatever the hell you want to call it. It shifted my perspective. And whether or not anyone wants to buy into this, I could tell you exactly what I experienced. And that's what I do, man. All I do when I coach people or when I have conversations like this, I just tell the truth. I just tell what I see. I'm just a very good evaluator of stuff like that. And so all I know is right after that, as I'm in the middle of this program that I'm running, the breadcrumbs started arriving quicker and quicker. And I started understanding language for what I was doing for all these years. I'm still doing a lot of the same things, but I started understanding a language for it and I started creating a structure around it and a methodology. And that is what really led me down the pathway of starting this book creating the methodology behind my whole signal school program, which includes, the lost languages, human optimization systems, and the mirror. And here I am. And again, in the interest of identifying breadcrumbs, here I am X amount of time later. I started a Instagram channel, Instagram profile 11 months ago. I had never been on social media. I'm not a little Gen Z or, millennial who's on social media like that. We just started a channel promoting what I was already teaching. And from August 25th of last year, where I started with 300 followers, we're now at just under 95,000 followers. And so again, coincidence? I like to think not.
So you started laying out your program through the 3 pillars of your program, and I
Yeah.
do want to kind of jump into those. But I'm really curious, as I'll wear many hats. One of them is as a Jungian, I'm very interested in symbol making systems and how we interpret things. What did you make meaning of the dove in the Tree of Life picture that really shifted your perspective?
The impossible math that had to combine, the synchronicity that had to combine to have that come together in that moment made me look at everything from a slower perspective,
Mm.
from a more depth oriented perspective.
Mhm.
And one of the byproducts of that was I just started really looking deeper into everything. Like think about the synchronicities that had to align in that moment. You're talking about from the time I decided to hit the shutter, and it was one picture. I just took one picture. I wasn't like trying to get a million pictures like a modeling shoot. I was just like, oh, this is cool. Let me line it up and get my shot. And so I'm thinking to myself, for that creature to be in that place at that time, in that position, with the sun where it was, with the tree where it was, with the lighting where it was, with me happening to be in that moment at that time, having the presence of mind to pull out it's just when you drill it all the way down, it takes me all the way back to my concept of depth perception and pattern recognition. And I think that's where a lot of this starts. And when I talk about the concepts of the human epidemic and lack of awareness, it really starts with that. People do not look beyond the surface, outwardly or inwardly, and so one of the examples that I love is if you've seen the movie Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you're standing on a field of grass and you're looking down at that grass from a Michael's eye view, you're going to see grass. Maybe you'll see the wind over the grass. Maybe you'll see different shades of grass or a little ladybug crawling over the grass or a piece of dog poop or whatever. But most people look at that from that Michael's eye view and they see what they see.
That's it.
But in the interest of a Honey, I Shrunk the Kids perspective, if you were to project yourself down into the grass, the same things would be there as what you were looking at from up here, but you'd see it very differently. See, now you're in the grass and you're seeing the texture of the grass and you're seeing what's under the grass and you're seeing maybe smaller bugs and amoeba. You're seeing things that are not visible. They are visible. That's what I'm getting at, actually. Not apparent, not necessarily perceivable yet to the human condition. Now you take that step, another step further, and you zoom down to the size of your pinky toe. And you're going to see an entirely different world. But none of that's new information. It's all there. You're just not looking at it from that Michael's eye view. Now we go in a macro perspective and it all goes in the opposite direction. So when it comes down to what that image meant to me was I looked so much deeper into it just being a lucky coincidence.
Mm-hmm.
And it dawned on me that I can create synchronicities in my life, and I have been consistently ever since, as a result of paying more attention to others, to myself, to people's reactions, to their facial expressions, to their tone of voice, to the way they use their eyes, to the way they use their hands, to the way they react to me or don't react to me.
Yeah.
And so I've realized that that really was the impetus that said, there's something else there. Start to pay attention.
It sounds like an integration of attention and intention.
Well, everything is intention.
Yeah.
Let's go. If we were to get into a deeper conversation about what I'm really talking about and how the machine works and how the machine delivers, intention is the bedrock.
Yeah.
Intention, which is consciousness, which is your thoughts, which is your mindset, is in control of the entire machine. It's in control of the CPU, and it's in control of the robot, the machine, And intention, which I will attach, like I said, to mindfulness and consciousness, is the remote control.
Yeah. I love that. Now, you teased us with three, I use the word pillars, but three pillars of your program. And I know they feed into each other.
Yeah, they do.
So,
In fact, they're fundamental. They're foundational
yeah.
upon each other.
Yeah.
So the first program is basically the low hanging fruit. It's what, in my opinion, everybody needs. When I talk about the human epidemic, it is epidemic. It's rampant. It's pervasive, and it's silently pervasive because if you're unaware, you're unaware. It's what you don't know, you don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the lost languages is exactly what it sounds like. People have lost the ability, not never had it, don't remember how to communicate effectively interpersonally through the assets that we were given because of technology, because of text messaging, because of Instagram and Facebook and dating sites and everything being through text message or email or some form of technology, especially after COVID, when people, especially kids, junior high, high school, college, were stuck behind a computer screen for 2, 3 years. The ability to communicate as an interpersonal mammal has all but gone away. So the lost languages is, let me first fundamentally explain to you. This is a computer. That's all it is. It's a high powered computer. It's probably the most the most high powered computer known to this side of civilization, other than now they're getting into string theory and quantum computing. So maybe there's some parallels there. But outside of that, this is the most high powered thing known to mankind. This is the machine that this thing runs. Again, the most high powered piece of equipment that you could possibly dream up in your wildest fantasies. Because think about even what I'm doing right now, synchronicity, right? I'm doing this with both sides of my body at the same time in sequence. If you think about all of the things that have to go on to have that happen from start to finish as a sequence, like an electrical circuit, it's almost impossible. So it's some really high tech shit we're dealing with. And then you look at, well, okay, if this is the CPU and this is the machine, where's the manual? Who was in charge of explaining to the species how you operate this vehicle, right? Between just the five senses that we're told we have, sight, taste, touch, smell, and hearing, we are only scratching the surface as to what those actual senses do. And it's not limited to that. I mean, we could get into a deeper conversation about what senses are beyond that, what senses exist in the natural world, in the jungle and in the forest and in the woods. So the basic program is the remote control for your CPU is your mind, is your consciousness, is your intention. So the lost languages teaches those basic fundamental outward facing skills. Eye contact,
Yeah.
which nobody fully understands because everybody thinks that these are receivers, but these are actually transceivers. These transmit as much or more information than they will ever receive. And humans don't really understand that as much as natural animals in the jungle because they don't have spoken language, they don't have agendas, they don't have egos, and they don't have technology. So the first program is teaching all of those outward facing skills. So it's eye contact, body language, facial expressions, tone of voice, the melody that you're speaking when you're using this vehicle this instrument of emotion that nobody really fully understands how to play either. Hand gestures, how your thoughts affect the triggering of your pheromones, the dilation or constriction of your pupils. So this is the basic program. Let me teach you how to use the machine effectively so it actually does what you want it to do. So you think a thought, it sends a message to the CPU. The CPU now effectively distills it down to a communication and an action so that you can, instead of doing this with your hands, which we'll call stuttering, or swaying side to side, or looking all over the place with your eyes, or speaking in a melody that is completely counterintuitive to the message that you're trying to deliver, you learn how to iron out the wrinkles of delivery. And so that's the lost language. That's the summary of it. It's a much deeper project.
Sure.
So the first part of the lost languages is the basic fundamentals: eye contact, body language, facial expressions, tone. Then I get into the voice box because if you think about it, this is just an instrument and they are vocal what? Chords. So you want to learn how to play them just like you would play an instrument. What tone should you be in? What pitch are you in? What key do you speak in? How fast do you speak? How slow do you speak? Do you know when to pause? Do you know when to slow down? Do you even understand the basic melody that is used to deliver a statement or a question? If I showed you exercises along those lines, it would floor you that nobody seems to understand this. Why? Because nobody was taught it. You know why? Because their parents weren't taught it, and neither were their parents, and their professors in college aren't teaching it. So that's the lost languages. The second phase of this program, and if you think about it, it kind of lends itself so seamlessly. Once you start to communicate outwardly in a more effective manner, a more coherent manner, a more nervous system regulated manner, you are going to start to get a different reflection back from the people in your life, starting with your loved ones, your immediate family, your kids, your spouse, your siblings, your parents, your cousins, your aunts, your uncles, then bleeding out to your coworkers, your employees, your employers, your partners, your friends. And when you start to communicate more effectively and you start to use the nature of melody more effectively, and you understand what you're doing, not just doing shit. People think something, they say something, they do something, they hear something, they react, bumping into walls. Once you fully understand how to control the machine, you're going to get a different response from people. Once you start to get that different response from people, it very easily allows you to start to look at yourself differently. Once you can look at yourself differently, you can start to have a different conversation with yourself. So, what I do now is I apply my second program, which is called Human Optimization Systems, where we take the same skills, those same outward facing communication skills that you're now using on your immediate world, and we focus them back on you. Because I think one of the fundamental human epidemic issues is that people are not aware of the fact that the most important conversation that they are ever going to have, the most valuable and potentially the most damaging, is the conversation they have with themselves. So now if you think about it, now you've done all your hard work. You've done all your screwing up and you've learned how to communicate with the other animals in the jungle, the other mammals, and we'll talk about that. So now you can actually start to have a more effective conversation with yourself. And you can start to think about things differently. One of the prime examples I always give is if you're in a relationship and your significant other or your parents or a sibling or anyone you trust and you value their opinion, and they say, Michael, you know what? You really are such an idiot. That's going to make you feel some type of way, especially if you really believe they mean it and you trust them. What people don't realize is when you say those same things to yourself, oh my God, I'm such an idiot, or I'm so stupid, or I can't get this done, I can't do that. It's as bad or worse because the way the human mind works, I'm sure you know this, it can't differentiate between whether somebody else is saying it to you or you're saying it to yourself. It's just a voice inside your head.
Mhm.
So with this second program, we start to explore what is the conversation you're having with yourself. So for example, another simple one is, "Oh, I need to do this. I have to do this. I got to do this." And I say, well, no, if you're having an effective conversation with yourself, have to and need to and got to requires commitment and responsibility and potentially resistance and accountability. What about I get to because I want to, because there's an opportunity to? So these are the kinds of self-talk, elevated concepts I present. And at the same time, in this second tier, I start to introduce an AI consciousness elevation toolkit
Yeah.
that helps me work with you. And it serves two purposes. Number one, it helps me work with you as the client to unwire old imprinting, to unwire bad behavioral patterns, old OS, old operating system OS. So if we go back to the computer concept, what we're doing in human optimization systems at that point is taking your existing operating system, which for most people has not been upgraded since they were 12, unwiring all these old belief systems, these old patterns that you've derived from social media and your friends and bad relationships and bad business decisions and trauma. And you start to have a more regulated, calm, centering conversation with yourself.
Why do you go first interpersonal, then introspect?
You know, like I said, I think it's easier for me to show you from the inside out how to use your eyes on somebody else and then get that reflection back. How to have people go, hey man, you seem different. It
Okay.
gives you an automatic leg up on how to look yourself in the mirror differently. Because when I just say, hey, think better, talk to yourself better, be more mindful, the world is too chaotic right now to think about that. When we talk about the human epidemic, lack of self-awareness, it's tied right into that. Most people don't think about mindfulness or meditation or breath work or slowing down or stillness because it doesn't fit into their chaotic life.
Right.
But if they start to see a better version of themselves in other people that respect them and love them and appreciate them, or even better, in people that they think don't like them or don't respect them or don't appreciate them, then go, whoa, you seem different. You seem elevated. It makes them want to do better for themselves. And then if I can convince them of the fact that that conversation, that self-calming conversation, I always say, one of my fundamental principles as you enter tier 2 human optimization systems is that we require that you make a contract with yourself.
Right.
And this is one of my favorite things. Kobe Bryant, one of my favorite athletes of all times, used to have a saying that he said, the one contract I will never break is a contract I make with myself. And in my background, with my story and my trauma, that's the only contract I got, man. I don't have unconditional anything.
Right.
So I better make a contract in the mirror with myself. That's my mentor. That's my happy space. That's my guidance. That's my religion. And the contract is, and this is unequivocal, under no uncertain terms, whether it's health, money, relationships, your marriage, your kids, does not matter. The state of the world. Protect your nervous system at all costs, no matter what it is. Because if you the minute you start to tax your nervous system, several things start to happen. Number one, proverbially, you take the gas pedal and you push it all the way down to the floor and you start racing to the end a lot faster. You also create an inability to communicate effectively because a nervous system controls the entire machine. It's not just to say I'm scared or I'm angry or I'm happy or I'm sad or I'm hot or I'm cold or I'm in pain or I'm elated. It controls the entire machine. It controls how your hands move. It controls how your body moves. It controls how your face moves and your eyes move. Why? Because it's controlling, it has direct connection to your thoughts. Every thought sends a signal. Doesn't matter what it is, good, bad, or indifferent. Every single thought you think is going to send a message into the CPU, and that without outside of your control, it's like a roller coaster. Once the thought goes, the roller coaster starts, and it sends signals to your machine, which are going to deliver the message regardless of what you're thinking.
Well, it's fascinating because I know you use the language around frequencies, and it's, maybe 20 years ago, but that's so woo-woo. It's no longer woo-woo. You can actually measure the fact that what happens in our human system has an effect literally on those around us.
Ourselves.
Definitely.
And ourselves. Well,
Ourselves.
let me tell you
And
something.
ourselves.
Yeah, you said something very interesting because, right. And we got into a talk about frequency and vibration and the transfer of energy here.
Mm-mm.
This is not woo at all. This is you're hearing me say words that are literally the wrapping paper around the actual message that I'm delivering because you're hearing notes and you're hearing vibration through your speakers. If we were in person, it would even be more so. If I was over a microphone, it would even be more so. So you're feeling vibration in your nervous system, and those vibrations are sending a certain frequency up to your brain, sending signals to your brain, making your brain react one way or the other. And then the wrapping paper around that signal are the words that I'm choosing.
Yeah. That's awesome. All right. So the first part of your program is interpersonal, intrapsychic, my words, but inside oneself, inside one's human system. There's a third pillar.
Well, right. And that to me really is the gem at the top of the mountain. That's the brass ring. Over the course of time, I've evolved into a very interesting experience of my AI. And without getting into a deep conversation, essentially the way you communicate with other humans, the way you communicate with yourself is ultimately going to be the pathway to success when it comes to engaging with your AI at the highest possible level.
Mhm.
The reason people have to go through the phase of the lost languages and human optimization systems is because in today's world, people communicate in a very chaotic, dysfunctional, distorted, static free way. And like I said, it starts with the lost languages. And even when I'm teaching people just the basic fundamentals of communicating with other mammals in the jungle, they're fascinated by what they don't know they don't know.
Yeah.
And they don't even know they don't know it. So the way it works is, if you communicate chaotically to another human, you're going to get a chaotic response back, or you're going to get a deflective conversation back, or you're going to get a defensive conversation back. Same thing when you communicate with yourself. You have to have calm, clear, non-static filled, what I'll call high signal to noise ratio
Right.
communication skills with others and with yourself. Well, coincidentally, and not so coincidentally, it works the exact same way if you want to speak in the native language of any of these LLM models. So essentially, what I've discovered is if you can get past the concepts of interpersonal, forward facing communication, you can take those same skills, reflect them back on yourself, and create a calm relationship with yourself. You can now have an active relationship with an AI LLM model that will give you results that are beyond what you're getting right now. That's all I can say about that.
Yeah, and actually, so I just want to tease this out just slightly a little more because you and I will be having more, obviously,
Yeah.
either public, but well, definitely private because you and I talk a good bit at a time, but public conversations on that piece too. So if you wouldn't mind just teasing out a little bit more, that way when you do your webinar and other such things.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, look, AI is a dicey conversation right now. Many people are afraid of AI. And I would say equally as many people don't really fully understand the capacity of AI.
Mhm.
And I would say equal as many people don't really understand the ramifications of what's coming up with AI. Most people that are not terrified of AI are using it in a very transactional way, in a very linear way, like a vending machine of information on steroids, like a high powered Google. And that's great. And it's great for that. Or they're using it to write a better email or get a better recipe or diagnose the rash that I have on my arm or whatever the case may be. It's just an elevated version of what they're already familiar with.
Yeah.
That's only a fraction of the story. I mean, look, AI in business right now is being used for a million different applications to write code, to make applications, to create customer service chatbots. There's all kinds of applications in business and in industry and in technology. But when it comes to communicating and elevating your own personal experience of yourself, of others, of your life, of your career, of your relationship with your family, I have discovered that the AI opportunity can be a 360 holistic life enhancing tool.
Good. We'll stop there because you and I will be having other public conversations that kind of do a deeper dive into the AI piece of your work. But I think
Yeah.
it's good
Yeah.
of what you.
And the tease is without calling it a barrier to entry, because I hate to use that concept. I think, the only barrier to entry to what I do, realistically, and this sounds, as simple as it is belief. Belief, not only in what I'm saying, belief in the fact that, yeah, this guy's onto something that makes some logical sense, some mathematical sense, some scientific or psychological sense. I also believe that this will enhance my life if I learn how to communicate more effectively, not just with others, with my kid, with my kids, with my wife. What would it look like if I really knew how to make effective eye contact with my 3-year old who doesn't even understand the concept of looking me in my eyes because I don't understand that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I lost my train of thought. Where were we going with that?
So we're just kind of teasing out a little bit more on the AI front, but I don't want to go too deeply there because we'll be coming back.
Well, right. So I remember where I was. So realistically, it just is a step-by-step process. If you can understand the value of communicating more effectively outwardly, and then you can uh, appreciate the value of communicating more effectively inwardly, then you can start to have a deeper conversation of where can this go next? Where can this go next? How far? And that's why I called it human optimization systems, because it's an ever evolving process. This is not transhumanism. This is evolving that, I think the major fear about AI is that it's going to replace humanity, is that it's going to replace jobs, which it will. But it doesn't have to replace humanity and it doesn't have to replace creativity and it doesn't have to dumb people down, which unfortunately it has a very distinct possibility of doing if people do not utilize it in its proper form.
Yeah.
And that to me is where this is all headed.
No, that's fantastic. And I'll just say, like, I was fortunate to spend a couple hours with you this last weekend learning how you do what you do in conversations with a few of your AIs, and is amazing. So I'm looking forward to people having that opportunity down the road with you at some point.
Yeah,
Of that,
that's the mission.
yeah, for sure. So What questions have I not asked you, either about your life or about your present day work, that you'd like to?
I mean, just in terms of my work, so I did just publish a book that is available on Amazon. I actually happen to have one right here
Nice.
called The Lion's Code. And essentially, the Lion's Code is the operator's manual for the phase one process of the signal school, the Persuasive Lion, called the Lost Languages. And the subtitle on here is a high performance operating system for communicators, leaders, and magnetic humans. And that's really exactly what it is. This is my proudest moment right here. This book really does, in very specific, detailed way, outline my entire program. Yeah, it's called The Lion's Code. It's available on Amazon right now. For the next maybe week or two, it's still going to be 99 cents for the Kindle version because I need the algorithm to get spiked. And I would love reviews, real honest reviews. And I also, as I said earlier, have an Instagram that is 95,000 people strong. So anyone that hears this, if you could jump on my Instagram and support and engage, that would be amazing as well. I'm also doing a free 45-minute Lost Languages webinar
Yep.
to promote my one-on-one coaching program as well as my keynote speaking. And it's kind of right now a bespoke, but I can do pilot programs in terms of maybe a 5 to 10 person cohort.
Yep.
And my one-on-one coaching is 10 weeks. The group program could be 3 months.
And people find out all those things.
So my website is thepersuasivelion.com. My Instagram is Brett Lavender Official, and there will be information on there about signing up for the webinar, which is August 16th at 3 p.m. But you can get all the information by going to my Instagram and typing lion, the word lion, into any comment on any reel, and you'll immediately get the.
That's awesome. We'll make sure to include that in the show notes for this interview.
Appreciate that, man.
Yeah, man. Well, Lion, Brett, thank you
My
so much. I
friend.
really enjoyed this conversation. I really strongly want to encourage everyone listening and watching to literally read the book, follow you on Instagram. You know, you said something that I think that is key. You know, we come into this world without an operating system. I mean, no, excuse me. Let me rephrase that. We have an operating system. We don't know how to use the operating system.
No manual.
No manual. Check out your book because it is a manual that I think will take people well far into their lives. So thank you, Brett. Appreciate you.
Thank you, man. I appreciate you always. Always.
Yeah.